So I will get to your free pick on the Twins Yankees in just a moment, but I got a true story to tell you. So last night, I'm sitting on the couch with my wife. We're watching the closing seconds of the game between the Chiefs and the Redskins. And I, of course, am cheering for the Chiefs rookie kicker to miss the game-winning field goal attempt. Why? Because I'm figuring at least go into overtime because maybe there'll be some scoring and somehow, miraculously, the game will go over the total because all the handicappers here at the site had the over. What happens? He hits it, 4 seconds left. My wife says, what do you want to do? I said, hey, on the DVR, we've got 2 episodes of House Hunters International. We've got the season debut of Hotel Impossible, one of our favorite shows. We have the cliffhanger second episode of the season of Scorpion, which just finished recording. So we start watching them. And like 2.5, 3 hours later, we're done watching them. I had some other work to do, and that was it. I never turned back to see what the hell happened. And this morning, I'm doing some other work, and suddenly I look at my emails, and I get an email from Trace Adams. And I can't use the 4-letter word that starts with an F because this, of course, is YouTube. But you can imagine what that 4-letter word is. And and he says, I got by the Redskins. And I'm going, what are you talking about? You had a big play on the Redskins last night. And I'm clueless as to what he's talking about. So I hop on over to NFL.com and I look at the score and I'm going, what the heck happened? And then I'm reading the game summary. And then I'm looking at the video and I'm thinking, yeah, it's good to be lucky. And that's the moral of the story. It's okay to be lucky. Just as I said Saturday when I had the 6th ever 20-down college football release of my entire career in the 15 years since I started this site. And I told you I had a 21-point home blowout. And I gave you SMU. And SMU won by 21 points only because they scored 3 touchdowns in the 4th quarter against Connecticut. It's okay to be lucky. Because how many times have you and I suffered agonizing, backbreaking, heartbreaking defeats in the closing minute, in the closing seconds over the years? It's okay to be lucky because when you go to the cashier's window today and you have that ticket on Kansas City, they're not going to say, oh, I'm sorry, we can't pay you the full amount of your winnings because Kansas City didn't win by a decisive, fair margin. No, they don't do that because you get paid in full, even if you were lucky. And that's the beautiful thing about gambling. And I've always said to you, and I've maintained this philosophy from day number 1, over the long haul, more often than not, those bad beats, you will have more positive results than negative results over the long haul. Yes, the glass will be more half full than half empty over the long haul. Now, I realize when you're suffering an agonizing last-second, last-minute defeat, when you get backdoored in the you-know-what, you don't want to hear any of this. It's all malarkey. You don't want to say anything to do with that half-glass full philosophy. Oh, you want a glass and you want it full, but we're not talking about anything other than a stiff drink because you want to drown your sorrows. You don't want to hear anything about what I'm saying. But over the long haul, because it's gambling, and I say the odds even out more in your favor than not. And you just saw 2 examples in my case, in your case, if you happen to be a gambler. One more thing about the game. 99% of the time, if you followed me over the years, I always tell you, and I think it's just good common sense, but it's amazing how many handicappers and gamblers don't follow it. 99.9% of the time, you bet the favorites early, you bet the underdogs late. Yesterday, if you happen to get my play, I told you to make an exception not only to that rule, but to another rule as well, which is that other rule being when the line crosses 3, 4, 7, and sometimes 10, I always immediately buy that half point, either up or down, depending on whether I'm in the favorite or the underdog, right? Because I'm using the power of the money to move the odds in my favor. But yesterday, I told you with Kansas City minus 7 points, and I released the play early in the day, I told you, hold on. Do not automatically buy that line down to 6.5. And why? If you got the play from me here at the site, because I felt that line was too generous for Washington backers. And I thought that everybody would come in because based on what happened with the Redskins the prior Sunday night, how they dominated, absolutely throttled the Oakland Raiders at home, that later in the day, and because that public perception of how underdogs are always the way to go on Monday nights. Later in the day, the public would come in and force that line down by half point, and you wouldn't need to buy the half point. You would get it without spending what I think is an inconsequential amount of another 20 cents anyway, and you would get that half point back anyway because the public would take Washington and drive that line down to 6.5, which is what happened by about 4:30 Eastern time up to about 8:15 Eastern time at just about every single book out there. You didn't have to do it. Worst case scenario, as I painted the picture for you, if you happen to get the play from me, worst case scenario, the line would stay at 7 and you'd buy down to 6.5. And absolutely worst case scenario, which I didn't think was going to happen and didn't, the line would go to 7.5. And hey, you'd buy down to 7. What's the deal? It wouldn't hurt you one way or another. So there is an exception to every rule. I think sometimes gamblers, and a hell of a lot of handicappers, because I don't think these things out, there is a strategy involved. There is a strategy involved when you're buying stocks, you're buying mutual funds, you're playing the market. There is always a strategy involved when you're playing games too. Listen, it's like when I've told you so many times in the past that you ought to have multiple places. If you're playing offshore, you've got to have one of those big offshore books, and I'm not recommending them because they ain't paying me money and it's not exactly legal, that always charge more and have heavier weighted lines for favorites, because if you're playing underdogs, why would you not want to play one of those books where they're automatically going to give you an extra half point to a point anyway? And if you're playing favorites, why would you want to play at those books? You want to play at other books where the lines are more favorable, every pun intended, for you, right? Strategy. You got to think of these things, guys. It comes into play so often. Okay, let's talk about this game tonight. The line is 7.5. Irvin Santana has gone on record numerous times that he's not a favorite player, Yankee Stadium is not a favorite place of his because the fly balls, the ball just flies out of the park. It's not one of his favorite places to pitch at. And, you know, he's made 5 starts at Yankee Stadium. His earned run average in them is 6.43. And this is a guy who is 7th among all starting pitchers in fly ball percentage in 2017. And you know the type of power the Yankees had. They led the major leagues in homers this season. They scored the 2nd most runs in all of baseball this season. So the fact that Santana has a 2.71 earned run average on the road this season, that goes out the window. Now, also, by the way, Santana has a 5.66 earned run average in 20 lifetime career regular season starts against the Yankees. Okay, we got to factor that in too. Luis Severino, great numbers this season, right? Great numbers since the All-Star break. 2.28 earned run average in his last 14 starts, in fact, coming in here. But I look at a guy who is inexperienced, who is on the biggest stage in a biggest game of his career tonight. That doesn't exactly inspire confidence for me. And plus, when you look in those last 14 starts, what was his worst start in that stretch? What was his 2nd worst start of the entire season? September 20th. Where? In the Bronx. Against who? The Minnesota Twins. 3 runs in 3 innings, and he needed 71 pitches to labor through that 3-inning stretch against the Minnesota Twins. And this is a guy whose earned run average pitching at home was 1.5 runs higher than pitching on the road. At home this year, 3.71, very good number. But 2.24 on the road, this is a guy who also, I think, will have a tendency to give up the long ball. And listen, everybody talks about the Yankees' power. Everybody talks about the way the Yankees scored runs. But from the All-Star break on, actually from the trading deadline on, this Minnesota Twins team really came on and exhibited great power and the ability to put runs on the board. So I look at that 7.5 number, and just like I said yesterday with Kansas City and Washington, and we needed a miracle for it to go over, I still think if I'm going to play this total tonight, the only way I would do it is to take it over at 7.5 and laying the 120 for the juice. Again, Yankees and Twins over. That's the way I would play it tonight. And we'll talk again tomorrow when we have that little game between Arizona and Colorado. We have the NHL starting this week. Remember, NHL coverage. Don Chambers, last year, phenomenal season. His first year as a full-time NHL handicapper, tremendous. Did you ever pay more than $14 for one of his NHL plays all of last season? No, you didn't. And he'll be back. So we'll start looking for some hockey action here as the week continues. Good luck, everybody.